For some brief moments of encouragement, the devotional message this morning is from Ephesians 5, verses 15 through 20, and I'll read that text in just a moment. First, it's great to see you here. For those who've joined us just a little late in the service, we're honored you've here. For those who've tuned in the last few minutes, thank you for joining us. We could almost hear you singing with us from your home. Now, granted, you didn't sound like the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, but the Wieuca Peachtree Choir wasn't too bad this morning, and thank you for sharing your beautiful selections of hymns. I have a theory, as both a pastor and a counselor, that the hymns that we lean to in the crucial moments of life are either hymns that we've experienced as being true, or hymns that we hope become true, or hymns that are both. Those that have been true for us in the past, and those that we cling to, believing by faith that they will be true and will sustain us in the future. Just a moment, I'll read that wonderful text from Ephesians chapter 5. But first of all, I was a little remiss at the beginning. We are certainly grateful for Rick Cobb, our Minister of Music and Worship, for our worship ensemble of Brock Derringer and Mike and Zach and Ryan, who play for us each week. They all have a week off. And as we began to think about the hymn sing, I appealed to one of our beloved staff members. Many of you have met and know David Huff, our financial accountant. David was also the minister of music at several churches, including First Baptist Lilburn, Georgia, where he retired as the executive pastor. He's been with us over 2 years now, and David's a gift to our staff, but he also is a wonderful keyboardist. And David, you did a great job leading us. Thank you this morning for leading us, and David will be leading us in singing our final hymn in just a few minutes, Higher Ground, page number 484. After the message, we'll stand and sing that first stanza together. There's so many wonderful events planned for the coming year, and during the holidays, we're so glad many get to travel. We are praying for those who are sick that they get well soon, and we look forward to more friends joining us. As already mentioned earlier in the service, it's going to be exciting to have some of our missionaries home with us this spring. Bethany will be singing, and she and Andrew sharing next week, and then we certainly look forward to welcoming the renowned national artist Cindy Morgan back with us. She'll be with us on Sunday and actually be flying out that evening after the Rick Bragg event for a songwriting session with Amy Grant on Monday morning. We're so excited she wants to be back with us at Wieuca, and many more events coming up later this spring. But I mentioned earlier there's a big announcement that I was eager to share with you. As we've plotted for the spring, we received a phone call just before Thanksgiving from our good friends at Peachtree Church, known to many of us as Peachtree Presbyterian. We have many friends there. I've had friends there, been friends with the past 3 pastors. When I did my doctoral studies years ago at Columbia, my graduation was at Peachtree Presbyterian Church when Dr. Harrington was there. And many of you who are a long time in Atlanta remember Dr. Frank Harrington. Many of you knew Dr. Victor Pence, and now Dr. Rich Kenwisher, my good friend, who did such a great job preaching here at Wieuca at the Community Good Friday service just over a year ago. Well, as you know, Peachtree Church is in a massive renovation. We've been talking about their renovation and ours. We had a few hiccups. They were able to proceed. They're rooting for us. We're rooting for them. Well, Pastor Rich called just before Thanksgiving and said, we're having our big Christmas Eve service at the Fox Theater. And we have the Fox Theater reserved for Easter weekend. But I really like the holy space at Wieuca, and I wondered if one of 2 things might happen. One, that you might plan your Easter service and we rent your sanctuary for the weekend and have our Easter services there. But he said, Barry, here's my preference. I'd rather merge together our 2 churches Easter weekend, Peachtree Church and Church at Wieuca, and let's give a gift to the community and maybe call it something like Easter on Peachtree. And we began a conversation. I took that to the church council where it was unanimously affirmed. We had our first planning meeting the week before Christmas Eve, and I'm excited to confirm to you that we're planning an Easter extravaganza of worship on our campus combining the congregation and staffs of the church at Wieuca and the Peachtree Church, also known as Peachtree Presbyterian. And we're beginning the plan to have 4 services. We're planning for between 5,000 and 6,000 people that weekend. And it will be by registration, not strict registration, but we need to spread the attendance out because we can't get all 6,000 here at the same time. And so they have graciously said, because it's your home campus, once we start the registration about a month before Easter, we want to give Wieuca a head start so they can register for up to 3 days, plan which service the members want to attend, and then we'll add that to our website so that the whole community can begin registering. At least 1 service on Saturday night and 3 services on Sunday. All the services will be identical in style and sermon, and it will be a great gift to the community. And here's what Pastor Rich said. He said, like you, I don't think churches compete with one another. They help one another. And we think such an event would be a great encouragement to both of our congregations and even deepen our partnerships for the future. So begin spreading the word. You'll begin seeing some announcements circulating around the community that just for Easter weekend, Easter on Peachtree will be hosted by the church at Wieuca, utilizing the staff and leadership of both the church at Wieuca and the Peachtree Church. Now, we confirmed this so we could begin announcing it right after Christmas and then get the details in line. So we need many of you to plan to sing in the choir for all 4 services. And we'll need ushers and greeters for all 4 services. So we have a grand opportunity, a tremendous challenge, and a great way for us to deepen our connection with the larger Buckhead and Brookhaven communities. So join me in excitement, pray for that service, and we're looking forward to a fun partnership with our friends at Peachtree Church. Now, Ephesians chapter 5, verses 15 through 20. What a great passage to finish out the year. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Do not get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit, speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit. Sing and make music from your heart to the Lord, always giving thanks to God the Father for everything in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Andy Griffith of the famed Mayberry TV program loved hymns, whether playing them on his acoustic guitar or singing them, and he held throughout his life to the proposition that hymns are companions for life travelers. Roderick Evans wrote, "In the midst of the storm, your lifeboat appears, often as a psalm, a hymn, a word, calming the fiercest winds of the soul." For years, we've talked about when New Year's approaches, ringing out the old and ringing in the new. But as people of faith, it's appropriate that we sing out the old and sing in the new. Music has the capacity to inspire, to encourage, to inform. We selected all kinds of hymns. Hymns with ancient writers, hymns with living writers, hymns of hope, hymns of encouragement. We had a hymn that's often called the hymn of the United States Navy. We had other hymns that were either sung during the birth of our children, at our wedding, or at one of our parents' funerals. Singing is an act of worship which aims to put our life in tune with God. And even when our singing is off key, our lives can be retuned to the Spirit. Among the forms of communication in all the Bible, there's advocated from God rhetoric, inquiry, narration, poetry, lamentation, and singing. Maybe you're here this morning, and as we finish the old year and begin a new one, you sense that you've lost your song. Or maybe you're here and with your life you've been singing the wrong tune. Or maybe singing is something that you enjoy listening to other people do. Or maybe you've totally misunderstood the role of music, that you thought it was about entertainment and developing a peppy spirit, and now you beginning to understand that music has a more vital role in deepening and enriching the human soul. Or maybe you're here and you would just say, Pastor, I've got a song and I intend to keep singing it. I hope that your new year is filled with music, but music across the spectrum. There are a few brief things that I'd like to share in this brief devotional message that might help us better understand why music is so highly valued in the Bible and why it's so important to our spiritual growth and faith formation. First, music is a sacred and diverse medium often used in worship that can be traced back to the very first human genealogy, to the very first human experience. Beginning with Jubal in Genesis 4, we're introduced to music. Remember in Genesis 4, 20 and 21, after the story of Cain and Abel, we find these words squeezed in, and Ada gave birth to Jabal, who is the father of those who dwell in tents and have livestock. And his brother's name was Jubal. Now imagine parents having twins and naming one Jabal and one Jubal. But Jubal was the father of all that play the flute and the lyre, which means that in essence, Jubal was the father of music. We love music. Jimi Hendrix, the rock artist, loved to say that music doesn't lie. If there's something to be changed in the world, it can happen through music. And Bono, the famed musician who speaks out frequently about his faith and his quest for justice and equality, says music can change the world because music changes people. Well, not only is music important in worship, but singing is a way for us to communicate with God and each other. Don't underestimate the verse in Ephesians 5, which says, sing to one another. We're singing to the Lord, but we're singing to one another. And anytime we gather for worship, there's always someone who needs to hear our song. I can't tell you the number of times after a worship service, people have said to me, Pastor, I don't remember what you preached about, but when we sang, and then they name the hymn, they talk about how it spoke to them through the melodious voice of their neighbor. The Bible describes this repertoire as speaking to one another in psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. That doesn't mean that everything we sing is going to come from the hymnal. Robert Weber says it's the repertoire of the ages, the ancient future repertoire of God. We sing to one another, we sing with a diverse repertoire, and we sing to the Lord. Oliver Wendell Holmes advised every one of you should take a music bath once or twice a week for a few seasons, and you'll find that music is to the soul what water is to the body. Verse 21 of Ephesians 5 talks about you sing and make music in your heart. And the NIV says, submitting yourselves to one another in the fear of God. When you look at that in the Greek, it says committing yourself to one another in the awe and wonder of God. Worship invites and prompts us to give our very best selves to the Lord. So as an act of worship, singing aims to bring us into alignment, into submission, into participation with the rhythm and cadence of God in the world. So whether we're singing a song of praise that might begin, then sings my soul, my Savior, God, to thee, how great thou art. Or whether we're singing a prayer, Spirit of the living God, fall fresh on me. Break me, mold me, fill me. Or whether we're simply singing the proclamation of good news. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Our music becomes like a tuning fork used to tune a piano or a guitar. And the hymn, the spiritual song, becomes one way to fine-tune and realign our soul with God's mission. Here's my takeaway. The God who inspires the music so wants to captivate our soul and compose a right rhythm within us so that we can live in harmony with God, with ourselves, and with each other. There are a lot of stories about music. Did I mention that someone happened to choose the Navy hymn, Eternal God, Our Father to Save? There's a story I'd like to share with you briefly in closing, which spoke deeply to me when I first heard it years ago. William McRaven, who was the commander of the U.S. Special Forces just a few years back, gave an oft-quoted baccalaureate speech at a university graduation in Texas. And he shared this story, which has been shared over and over and over again. Perhaps you've heard it. He talked about his experiences in becoming a United States Navy SEAL. And if you've had a friend or relative, or you yourself have been in one of the armed forces, or perhaps even the Navy, you know that the SEAL training is regarded as being some of the toughest training in the world. So McRaven spoke about what was called Hell Week at BUDS, B-U-D-S, the Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL Training. He talks about the 9th week of that training being called Hell Week because you go 6 days with no sleep, constant physical exercise and mental harassment, and then one special day in what's called the Mud Flats. The Mud Flats are an area between San Diego and Tijuana where the water runs off and creates the Tijuana sloughs. It's a swampy patch of terrain where the mud will actually engulf you like quicksand. You paddle down the mud flats and spend 15 hours trying to survive freezing cold mud, howling wind, and the incessant pressure from your instructors to give up and quit. Well, as the sun began to set that Sunday evening, his training class, when he entered the Marines, that is the commander of U.S. Special Forces, when he was beginning SEAL training, they were ordered to enter the mud, and the mud consumed each man until nothing was visible, he says, but their hands. The instructors told us that if we could leave the mud, 5 men would quit, and just 5 men would quit. They could all get out of the cold. They were determined to make it through and not quit. So looking around the mud flat, it was apparent that some students were about to give up. They were still over 8 hours of the 15 from finishing, and it was bone-chilling cold. He could hear teeth chattering and his shipmates shivering. It was so loud, he said, you could hear it like an echo in the night. And then all of a sudden, one voice from the mud flats started singing. And he said he was out of key and off tune, but we're thinking, what is he doing? But then one voice became 2, then 2 voices became 3. And all of a sudden, their entire class was singing in the mud, in the chilling cold. And he said, we knew that if one man could rise above the misery, then others of us could do it as well. And the instructors even threatened us that they would keep us more time in the mud if we didn't stop singing. But the singing was so energizing, we kept singing anyway, and the singing persisted through the night. And somehow the mud became a little warmer, and the wind became a little tamer, and the dawn seemed not so far away because we had a song that sustained us to the end. And then McRaven said to the students in the class, Hell Week is coming for you. No matter what your vocation, keep the kind of song that will get you through your Hell Week. And Paul said, sing to one another psalms and hymns and spiritual songs that will fill you with the awe and the wonder of the Lord. As we sing out the old and sing in the new, it is my prayer for you and our prayer for each other that God will give us a song to get us out of the doldrums and over the victory line as we press on toward the mark of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. This coming year, we begin next Sunday with a new worship series about the quest for a deeper life. But there's a song that becomes a prayer that urges us to press on to higher ground. And this year at Wieuca, with a year filled with promise and potential, we're moving toward higher ground. What a great way for us to sing our words of commitment. Let's stand together. It's hymn number 484. We'll sing verse 1 and then be seated afterward, and Josh will come and remind us of what we need to remember in the days to come. Let's stand and sing these words together.